Today I'm gonna talk about automation and integration on Azure, and the plan is talking about these four services that can help us to have a unique and solid environment to actually have integration and automation on Azure. So my name is Saeid Dahl. So I'm a technical leader and solution architect at vSafe. vSafe is a Microsoft partner in Sweden. My main focus is on automation, integration, hybrid cloud, and cloud adoption. So the things that I love about automation and integration is removing routine tasks and use as much as you can services in Azure to have a good environment and fast environment actually. So what is Azure automation? How many of you work or have been working with Azure automation? One, two, perfect. So Azure automation is one of Azure services that helps you to have automation based on script or Python, and also you can have your IT process on Azure automation, and also there are a lot of connections that you can build on Azure automation. Beside that, you have configuration management and desired system, desired configuration for your environment, and it helps you to create different automation for your organization. Azure automation account. As soon as you create an Azure automation account, you can have these items, these options in your environment. So you can have process automation, shared resources. You can have DevOps, which is called source controller in Azure automation. And also change tracking, update management, and as I said, desired state configuration. So what is process automation? In process automation, you have three important parts. One of them is runbook. So in runbook, you can build a script system based on runbook and push this script and automation to VM or environment or do specific things based on the script that you have. And also it supports PowerShell, Python, PowerShell Flow if you have some problem with coding with PowerShell or Python, and it does support this flow. But please note, if you use PowerShell workflow graphical mode, you have to expect a bit slower runbook than the normal because it needs to be compiled when it's run. And also you have runbook gallery. So if you need to have an automation, but you don't want to spend more time for script part and create from scratch, maybe you can find in PowerShell runbook gallery or also Python. So there are a lot of ready script there that you can use and just need to update the parameters that you need for your automation. Also, you have the connections that you can build for your runbook. One of them is webhook. So webhook, as you know, it's a kind of URL that you can call your automation and trigger the automation that you created. And basically, with webhook, you can easily feed your webhook and automation by parameters that you need and send it to the automation. Also, you have logic apps or Power Platform ready connection that you can use, and it helps you to trigger and update your runbook and actually trigger your automation. You have this option to monitor your runbooks, to check logs, if it's failed, if it's suspended, and if you need, you can use output in your code, which helps you to do some traditional way of debugging and troubleshoot of your code. And it's easy to reach to this environment to see what is the problem with your code. Or if it's completed, you can have some output to read from that. The other part is hybrid worker group. So when you are not using Azure hybrid worker group, basically you're using sandbox. And this sandbox, it's a kind of backend by a server that is not maintained by you, and it's basically maintained by Azure serverless system. So you can push your code, but there is some limitation on that one. So also you can use hybrid worker group. So hybrid worker group is backed by VM that you can have it in Azure, or even you can have it in your on-premise environment. So you can easily push the automation that you have created to on-premise environment. There is no limitation for that. So, but for that one, you need, if you want to use your automation on your on-premise environment, you need to use Azure Arc enabled server. And you need to project your on-premise servers to the cloud first, and then easily you can install the extension, which is related to this agent, to your server and use your automation on your on-premise environment. So maybe you think when you can use Azure Sandbox and when you can use Azure Hybrid Worker Group. So here there is a table that you can see. For example, if you want to, if you have a long-run coding or a script that needs to be run more than 10 minutes, imagine. So on that case, you have fair limitation on Azure Sandbox. You cannot use that one for long-run coding. So you need to use Azure Hybrid Worker Group. So you can have a VM bucket for your runbook. Other than that, if you need to run script based on, for example, WMI coding, that you need to somehow elevate your script for automation, on those items you need to use hybrid worker group. The other options that you have in Azure Automation is shared resources. So in shared resources, you can actually define one of these resources in your environment, in your Azure Automation account, and reuse that for other runbooks, other automation. So basically, you have schedule, you have modules, which is related to PowerShell modules. You can, for PowerShell modules, you can use PowerShell gallery, upload it, and use it in your automation account. Or you can have your modules that's uploaded to automation account. Also, you can use credential, connections, certificates, and secure variables. And all of these things that you can see in this table basically reusable for other runbooks. Desired state configuration. So for desired state configuration, I was thinking maybe it's better to go through the one example to get better understanding of that. Imagine that you have a roommate who is very messy. You have always problem with this guy. And every time that you go to kitchen, your face is like this because there is a mess there. So you think enough is enough. So you define and create a kitchen list for cleaning your kitchen. Counter tools must be cleaned, dish should be in dishwashers, and all of these checkbox every time should be checked, and you make sure that your kitchen is like this. I know this kitchen is not the first one, but I couldn't find that kitchen being clean. So it's same for desired state configuration. When you define a kind of configuration state, you desire that configuration will be able to push through your VMs. So imagine that you need to have IIS configuration on your VMs every time that these VMs or new VMs join to these groups. So you can easily use this option to make sure that IIS is always enabled and configured in your VM. In desired state configuration, you have 5 items that you can use. For example, you can use it for infrastructure as code. And imagine that you want to have this infrastructure as code for implementation of AVD. So you can make sure by this item, the AVD after the creation will be joined to your domains. And it meets all of the compliance that you need. Or also you can have it for disaster recovery, application deployment, and configuration drift detection. So you can make sure the software or the application or the configuration that you need to be installed is always in compliance. So here I have recorded a kind of demo for you to see how does it work. So here in state configuration, I'm going to add a VM, which is basically we need to install the agent on that machine. And as you can see, the type of the configuration mode that I'm going to select is apply for apply and correct. So it means if the configuration that I need to be applied, if it's not available, so install it. If it's the problem, just correct it. And after I added the VM, so I can easily check that it's compliant. So we need to add the configuration. But before that, in the configuration, you can have some predefined items that are available in the gallery. For example, if I want to install IIS, so it's available, I just need to import that into my configuration. And as soon as I added this one, I can use it for configuration part. But here I'm going to have a specific one for IIS, and we need to create a PS1 file based on configuration method that that is for desired state configuration. Name the configuration file, and when we have the configuration file, we have 2 steps here. The first step is having compliant configuration on 0. It means this file needs to be compiled, and it means this file is not enough. It should be converted to MOF file, which is readable for desired state configuration. So as you can see, it's going to compile, starting, and when it's ready, we can use that for our state configuration. So it's running. And now it's completed. So when I back to, and also we can see every single logs that we have for the compiling part. And now the compiled configuration count is 1 now. And if I go to automation and the VM that I have, I just need to add this node for the configuration. So this node is registered for the configuration file. And if I refresh, as you can see, it's pending. So every 15 minutes, this desired state configuration will check the configuration. And as you can see in this VM, we don't have any IIS configured yet. So when is in progresses, and after a while, it will become completed and compliant. And if you check, you can see there is some logs there, and you can see which components have been installed on your VM. And if I back to VM, I can see the IIS has been configured as I desired, like this. The good things about Desire the Set configuration is it's not only for Azure VM Cloud. You can use it for on-premise servers, but of course you need to use Azure Arc, as I said before. Update management. So you know how much is important you have VM updated in your environment. So in Azure Automation, you have this option to define the scope of the updates for different VMs. And also, it's not only about VM in cloud, you can use on-premise one too, based on the cloud onboarding server. So in that option, you have the Azure Automation account to basically push the updates for these operation server systems, Windows and Linux, and you can easily manage that. Microsoft recently provided the new environment update management, which is in preview. I like it, but it, as I said, it's in preview. So you can still use this old update management, which is work. And if you need to get some more information, to see more details, you can use Update Management Center. Also, I have a recorded demo here, so you can see how update management works for different scenarios. As you can see, this VM has been onboarded, and I already have some updates ready to install. But if I want to add more VM, I have a lot of options here based on subscription, based on locations, resource groups. If you want to set the update management for VMs based on tags, you are able to do that. And as you can see, I'm going to select some subscription. If I press preview, I can see all of VM that I am able to assign to this update management. So I have the tag options here. Based on tags, I can automatically add VMs to update management. Or if you have a kind of agent already installed on your VMs, you can select them based on agents too. So here I'm going to select the machines and find the machines, the test one, which is already have the agents. And if I go to type of update that I need to select, I can easily select the specific updates that I need. And also, if you want to include or exclude specific KB updates, so you can do that based on the schedule that you need to check and manage the maintenance window. In this case, I selected, for example, every 2 weeks on Wednesdays is the maintenance window for the updates. And one thing about the maintenance window is when you define, for example, 120 minutes for maintenance window, it's not something that's update management, download all of updates, push, and ignore the maintenance time. So it's always calculating by Azure if it needs some updates to be restarted, and after that we need more time. So if there is more updates, it will wait for the next maintenance window. It's always 120 minutes that you have. So I have this VM onboarded, and this is the preview version of the update center. As you can see, it's a bit more fancy, and you can get more information about your VM. So in this option, I'm going to push a specific updates manually called one-time update. So if you need to push an update directly to the VM without waiting for a maintenance window, you have this option in preview version of the update center. So I selected the VM and I selected all of updates, and if it's required and maintenance window time that I need for that, I set 235 minutes because it's one time update. And after a while, you can see no pending updates because all of updates have been installed on the VM. And even inside the VM that you have, you can easily check what update has been installed and the last status of that. So, source control or DevOps. In Azure Automation, you have this option to connect your Azure Automation to, for example, GitOps or DevOps, Azure DevOps. It helps you to use DevOps idea for your runbooks. So imagine that you have this ability to push the last changes directly to the runbook that you have without any problem. And you just need to connect your source controller Azure Automation account to actually the DevOps environment or GitHub. Live demo. I want to show you some part of this source controller part. So here, so as you can see here, I already have a source controller connected to my environment, and some updated have been added already. But if I go here in source controller, I can see the source controller that is connected. So it's easy. You just need to create a connection between your source controller and the Azure Automation. But please keep in mind that you need to provide a path access key to your repository, or even if you face some error on DevOps, Azure DevOps, maybe you need to enable third-party connection on your organization settings on DevOps. So you can easily connect it to your repository. And for example, I have this. Okay, this one is up to date. Let's do some changes here. For example, here. And pushing new updates to the Azure repository that I have. And since the autosync is enabled for this one, it should be, after a while, be synced to my repository. It's not started yet. Sometimes it's a bit slow, but if you feel that you need to do a sync, there is no problem. As you can see, it's started already, but if you need to sync it immediately, just open this Git repo and start sync. And it's going to do a full sync instead of an incremental sync. So it's still in queue, just run. And when it's completed, if I go to runbook that I have, which is connected to this one, and check for view, yes, it's updated. So basically, it helps you to keep update your code here. Okay. Lost track here. Perfect. So another service that we have in Azure that helps us to have automation and integration in our environment. Azure Function. So Azure Function is like this, I think. It's like Superman, but let's say functional man. So it helps you to have a unique environment with less interface maintained, and you just need to focus on your code, and it helps you a lot. So in Azure Functions, you have common scenarios that you can use that for web API, process file uploads, server workflows, respond to database changes, and run scheduled tasks, reliable message queue, which is amazing. You can connect it to the message system like event grid or queue, IoT data streams, and also process data in real time connected to the SQL DB for read or write. Also, you have a programming language that you can use: C#, F#, Java, JavaScript, PowerShell, and Python. I'm a kind of PowerShell lover, so I can say that I've built more than 50, 60 automation, integration, and apps based on PowerShell on Azure Function apps. And one cool thing is about durable functions. I'm not going to deeply talk about durable function. It's completely different topics. And I recommend that you use this link and check durable function, which is really good. It is really good feature. And I use PowerShell and fan-in, fan-out, fan-out, fan-in for many different scenarios, which is amazing. But if you want to use human interaction, just wait a bit. I'll tell you that you have better option for human interaction if you don't like to use coding here. So basically, Azure Function is a serverless option that you have to implement your scenario based on the coding that you are going to do. I have a question from you. What gives people feeling of power? No idea? Money? Status? How about the technical people? Ability to innovate? Okay, I'm a bit exaggerated, okay. But yeah, why not? It's about time, right? Time is really important. So if you have this ability to innovate without code or no code, it means you can save a lot of time, right? And it means you can implement your solution in, less time than the person who working with coding system. So I'm talking about Azure Logic Apps, which is amazing. So Logic Apps, it's basically same as Power Automate, but in Logic Apps you have different connections, which is more connected to Azure resources and enables you to have unique connection integration with your Azure resources. In Logic Apps, you have Visual Designer, which is available in both Portal and also in Visual Studio Code, which has helped you a lot to implement your solution easily and improve productivity compared to coding the app from scratch. You have a cost-effective scenario. So as I've said, it's all about the time and also the service that you are going to pay. So if you have a simple scenario or solution that's going to implement, you can use Azure Logic Apps consumption plan, which is only paying for of usage actually, and helps you a lot. Also integration with other services. The developers knows that how much is hard to create connection with different services. Logic Apps already create or defined by different connections or service connection that you can have. This small tile is small part of the connections that you can have in Logic Apps, but you can imagine since it's Azure service, you have a lot of options to connect this service to other Azure services. And also you have this option to actually connect your logic apps to other or third-party application or services. Also, you have logic apps on Kubernetes, which is in preview, and this item is important. It's free in preview. So if you would like to test it, it's a good time that you can use that. And it helps you to do a lot of things and basically manage your logic apps on app services. If you want to learn more about that, just go to this link. Microsoft explained a lot of things, and also you can find some samples to how to create the service in Azure. So let's have a look on differences between these two services that we just explained: Azure Automation, Function Apps, and Logic Apps. So trigger types in Azure Automation and Function Apps is kind of close to each other. For example, time-based, webhook, that one has HTTP call, or in Function Apps you have trigger on queue, which is really cool. And for Logic Apps, as I've said, since you have connections with different services in third party, you can create different triggers. And it's really good to use. The supported language: PowerShell, Python, and graphical in automation, and a lot of language to support in Function Apps. Also in Logic Apps, no code, as I've said. The things that I need to mention about that is the pricing. In Azure Automation, you have 500 minutes free per month. So if you have some solutions that you do not need to have a VM or on-premise VM bucket for Azure Automation, let's say you have a kind of automation that's runs on like 5 to 10 minutes, you can use this solution. It's enough for you, and it's great. And as you can see, it's kind of free. Also, for Function Apps, you have consumption and premium plan. For Logic Apps, it's the same, but also in consumption plan, you have 4,000 action free included. It means kind of free if you want to implement it for like a simple scenario. Azure API management. How many of you know about Azure API management? Lovely, 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 perfect. Of course you should know. So to explain it very simple, it's a kind of front-end service of your API services or other services that you need to have your for your organization or your scenario or solutions. So API management is a kind of service, is not actually it's a service that you can use with different connections that helps you to have a unique, reliable API system that can be connected to other services. You can have admin portal, you can simplify application integration, you have developer portal, which is, I think, cool, and web-based interface, and also you can have a secure and reliable system. So I was thinking to explain this API, Azure API management more, but why not we have a full live demo of all of these services that I just explained to you. So I have created this diagram to show you this live demo that I'm going to show you is basically based on these 4 services that I just explained. So before we check the demo, I'll explain this one. So we have API management as a front service of for the request and response. This API management is connected to Logic Apps and Function Apps. Here I have a server which is located in my on-premise environment. So this server is not connected to any cloud services, completely on-premise. And also, this server is not a domain joined server. Imagine it's a kind of organization that they need after each onboarding for users, for example, specific users, developers, they need to have a local access to this server for some specific things. So what we have here, this server is projected to the cloud by Azure Arc, and Azure Automation agent has been installed on this server. And when I send requests to create account from outside, or let's say in as a user, the API management will send my request to Logic Apps, and Logic Apps triggered Azure Automation, which is include a runbook by PowerShell and a script. And this script will create an account as a local account in this server. And as a response, this path will be actually respond the result of the request to the user. In the left side hand, we have Azure Function, which is responsible to create or check accounts in the cloud side. So I can send a request to create a user in Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and at the same time, I can have a local account in the server. So this is the scenario that I have implemented, which is really simple, but I want to explain to you how you can use these services together to have a unique, solid automation. So let's go for this demo. Let me see here. Okay. So here I have the URL of my API management. Be careful, your head. I have this URL as from the API management. So by this request, I can see how many accounts I already have on my server in the local environment. So if I back here and check the Logic app, as you can see, it's already triggered. And if I go to automation account that I have and do a refresh here, seems it's already completed. Yes. If I back here, refresh, still running, and it's now successful up here. And I get some information, and it's all of there are all of local accounts that I have on server. So I have go. This is my local server. So I have already 4 accounts here, but I would like to create a new one. So here I have another API call, which I can send some parameters to actually the API and the accounts. And by pressing send, it sends a post request to the API management that I have, and the Logic apps, which is triggered again. And here I have the Azure Automation, which is queued right now. And that's why it takes time, because it's like sending requests to Azure Automation, and it needs to be run based on the agent trigger. So let's see if it's started. Yeah, it's already completed. And as you can see, it's created, added to admin group successfully. So if I logged in to the server again, do a refresh, I have the account. So I've done this for the local one. Also, I have another one which I can see the accounts that I have in cloud. So for this one, if I go to API management, you can see I already have it's a bit slow. So I already have 2 API for calling. And for this one, which is for the local users, if you check here, it's easily connected to the logic apps. So if I want to add another API, it's easy. You have already the logic apps, app services, function app, and also you have this option to connect it to the container apps. So you can use this scenario easy for your automation environment. And it's perfectly work for different scenarios and different scales. The last part, yeah, some security advices. Last privilege to get work down and also use RBAC, role-based access. Please make sure that you are not going to give a lot of access to different users and you have role-based access for your environment. Limit number of high privilege. 2-3 admins, it's enough for your environment. Use identity manager. Hopefully, run as account is deprecated and you cannot use that for Azure automation, and you only have identity manager for your systems. So please use that if you want to use system admin access for your automation. Don't save secure credential connections in your code. It's not secure. So please make sure that you are not going to save anything like this. Use private endpoint as much as you can to keep your traffics for your automations and locally, or at least not expose it to the public environment. And also this API management helps you a lot to keep your APIs systems from the public access. Always check policy definitions for your environment and make sure that your policy are compliant in different way. Restrict IP access, and you can use that for logic apps and function apps easily. And the end, secure data in history. For logic apps, I've seen a lot of people that forgot this part. So as soon as you just back to history and check the flow, you can easily read the credentials. So please make sure. And also you can check Microsoft documentation to how to secure that part for the code view part 2. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I understand you prefer PowerShell, but what solution you prefer? Automation, Azure function, logic apps, API management, or a mix of all?
It really depends on what exactly you want to do with the integration. I showed this example to you to see you can use combination of these services together. But based on my experience, I have created a lot of automation based on Azure automation, and it works like a charm. But of course, function app is a bit faster than Azure automation, because for Azure automation, you have the queue part that needs to be start, the trigger, and it's a bit slow. But if you haven't any problem with that, Azure automation, it's kind of free, you know? So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No more question? Even online? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.